It's Thursday, May the 7th, and welcome to Morning Message. Yesterday evening, I called my mom. She lives in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, just to say hi and see how she's doing. And she's doing well, thanks for asking. And she's been following these morning messages, of course. And she reminded me of a story last evening, and she's a little surprised that I haven't told this story yet. So I'll share it with you now. One evening, we were watching television, a cooking show. I don't remember if it was the Galloping Gourmet or what particular show it was, but as they were heading to a commercial break, the announcer said, to stay tuned because after the commercial break, they were going to give a recipe for bread pudding. I'd never heard of bread pudding before, and I was rather disgusted by it. I knew what bread was, I knew what pudding was, and they didn't seem to go together as far as I was concerned. And I expressed my feelings, and Mom started to laugh at me. And she said, you eat bread pudding all the time, and it's one of your favorite desserts. We call it Queen's pudding. So I had no idea that Queen's pudding was bread pudding, and I do love bread pudding now. It's funny how we name things sometimes and sometimes give things euphemisms. There's that saying, a rose by any other name would smell as sweet, but a stink bug is still a stink bug. I was thinking about euphemisms because this Sunday coming, our readings aren't necessarily about death, but they're readings that we would commonly use at funerals. Now this Sunday coming, May the 10th, Mother's Day, we actually are combining services at St. Paul's with the good folks at Christ Church Cherry Valley. We're doing this virtually, of course, and later this afternoon, actually, I'm recording a sermon from Archbishop Ron Cutler. He's going to be our preacher on Sunday, so I'm looking forward to putting all of that together. But the readings, as I said, are readings that we associate with funerals. I gave Archbishop Ron Cutler the opportunity to switch out those readings and preach on a nearby Saints' Day or something like that. But he's decided, and good for him, to stick with the readings appointed for the day. But it did cause me to think a little bit about funerals. And, we use different words to talk about death. We might talk about sleep or gone away or in heaven or something like that. And all the time we're really just talking about death. I think it's okay to use euphemisms, particularly when a death has happened, because nobody really needs to be reminded of it. We all know that it's taken place. Beyond that, I think there are essentially three reasons for having a funeral, and I often talk about these things at funerals. It is an opportunity for us to acknowledge our grief. We're grieving, so in a community of family and friends, we acknowledge that grief to one another. Another purpose is to celebrate somebody's life. That individual who's died has impacted our lives in some way, and so we celebrate the gift that they were to this world, and to us particularly. And the third reason is to proclaim our faith. Funerals are an opportunity for us to proclaim our faith, because very often around death and around grief, we don't always feel God's presence. And so we gather in a community, we gather around the language of our faith to remind ourselves that God is indeed with us and remains faithful to us in times of our grief. That's true when somebody we know has died, but I think it's also true around a pandemic. as well. A logical question to ask is, where is God in all of this? And many of us don't really feel God's presence in our lives or in the world when we're in the midst of a pandemic. And so we take these opportunities like this morning message or other things that we might do to try and remind ourselves that history tells us, our faith tells us, those times when we are aware of God's presence tells us that God does indeed remain faithful to us during these times and has not abandoned us. So my hope and prayer for everyone today is that you continue to feel God's blessing. Amen.